If you've ever wondered in Valorant why some players consistently rank up and why they always seem to make the right play, well, you're in the right place. In this episode of this Valorant Life podcast, we do a deep dive into active play styles and passive play styles, and how this approach can dramatically impact your journey in ranked. We also discuss the secrets to becoming a more dynamic and impactful player. So, if you want to level up your game and achieve your dream rank, then stay tuned. Let's get into it. Welcome to episode 3 of this Valorant Life. I'm excited to discuss this with you, Adam. We're going to be going over active playstyles versus non-active playstyles, and then process over results. So with that, why don't you kind of take the first shot, Adam, defining what's an active playstyle, what's a non-active playstyle?
Okay, so an active playstyle, kind of like, in my opinion, is something that's like minimizing downtime. Like you're always pushing to be the one doing something. So I guess like the proactive player versus the reactive player is probably the easiest explanation for it. And in Valorant, it's like most common you'll see this kind of be defined by your role. So like most people think of duelist as being the active player, or like initiator being the active player. And then of course controller and sentinel being the more non-active players. So that's like a loose leaf definition. I think proactive versus reactive is probably the easiest.
So one, I think that makes a lot of sense on attack, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does it relate between like having an active playstyle versus non-active playstyle on attack versus defense? Because defense, you almost feels really defaulted or like leaning towards being quite non-active.
I guess like that is kind of contesting map control, which I feel like a majority of the players don't do well. They like turtle on site, and like that whole don't peek mindset is
Mhm.
like so, I guess, big in the lower
Yeah,
ranks.
don't peek, stay alive.
Yeah, don't peek, stay alive. So that's that's probably why most people don't rank up in lower elo. They're hard stuck there, at least for their
Yeah.
defense. But like the dynamic, I guess there is like duelists typically should be first or second contact, like getting the first or second duel. And of course, like with a jet or a chamber or arena, like you want to get the first blood. So that I guess is kind of like an active play style. But I think more importantly, active play style on defense looks more about like rotating and like your rotating timings.
Mhm.
So for a duelist or an initiator, they're going to be more likely to fast rotate or maybe fast flank. And then for a sentinel or a controller, they're more likely to maybe play anchor, like do like a slower rotate. Or if they are going to rotate quickly, they're going to do it by looking for the lurker or something like
Mhm.
that, like pushing
Mhm.
through mid. So I guess those are some examples of having an active playstyle on defense, like looking for the first pick, fast flanking, fast rotating, and I guess, yeah, just making sure like you take space when the enemy team takes space, like you take it somewhere else.
I would say then it feels like you would prefer then for ranking up like the duelist initiator playstyle, and then maybe controller in the middle, and then sentinel probably last, it sounds like, in terms of the ability to affect the game.
I
Is
would
that
say
fair?
so. That is fair. The controller and sentinel part is a little bit shaky because on defense and offense, you can definitely play pretty actively as like Cypher or Killjoy, just because you have util to help you take map control. Right, you
Mhm.
can
Okay.
cam, like, you can turret something. But regardless, that's like controller sentinel is like 50-50, I would say.
Okay. Okay. And so if a sentinel, let's say, is probably the most passive of playstyles, how does this relate to, the sentinel role in pro play that we all see?
I think in pro play, your sentinel player has to be really good at anchoring and dodging util, and just counter to like most people thinking like sentinel players have to have really good mechanics, because most of your fights are going to be dry duels, especially if you're
Mhm.
playing against a team in pro play that just breaks all your utility. You're just
Mhm.
like a
Mhm.
body that doesn't have a get out of jail free card unless you're playing
Mhm.
chamber.
Mhm.
So that's probably why you've seen NRG move Victor to Killjoy over
Mhm.
FNS playing Killjoy, like he was playing
Okay.
Viper on some maps,
Mhm. Mhm.
which historically before the FNS was playing Killjoy, but he would just get run
Yeah.
over. And then you have Victor, like he's really good at getting his one or two on site.
Mhm.
So
Or Alpha Air for FNC, right?
yeah,
Or Fnatic.
that guy's insane.
He's
Oh my
he's cracked.
god,
Yeah.
he's insane. But yeah, I think having really good mechanics is not a requisite or like a pre-requirement in ranked, because you can
Mhm.
kind of get away with just getting cheese kills off of trips,
Mhm,
or like, winning rounds off of peeking off Killjoy turret. But in pro play, you have to have good mechanics, I
mhm,
think.
mhm. Does and maybe this is more like a general question. Do you think pro play really matters at all for solo queue?
To a certain extent, like if you're a pro, you should, I guess, bare minimum, be able to have the mechanics to mindlessly autopilot to get to Immortal 3. But I know
No, I
there
guess
are.
I'm meaning in terms of like the average player.
Mm,
Does what happens in pro play really and like, I think a lot of people would get obsessed with comps,
mhm.
right? Does that matter for the average player trying to rank up in solo queue?
No, not at all. You can win games with 5 duelists, like 4 duelists, 1 smoke. Like, yeah, comp doesn't really matter, I think, until like you're maybe immortal. And even then, it's not important. You can still win
Like
games with
even no smokes, even like
even
no
those
smoke player?
smokes. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think smokes are, honestly, smokes aren't even that important because, like, when do you have good executes, anyways, with it? You can just like work the middle of the map and take aim duels instead. So,
Okay.
yeah,
So I shouldn't be hovering my initiator. I should just insta lock fade. And if there's no smokes, there's no smokes.
100%.
Okay. Okay. Well, I will never feel apologetic about it again.
Good.
Uh, why do you recommend an active playstyle over a passive playstyle?
I guess, like, because you inherently just have more control over the game. Like, if you play passively, then that means you're encouraging subconsciously or indirectly is probably a better word, your teammates to take a first duel, right?
Hmm.
Because if you're playing passive on site and your teammate dies, then you have no say in how that bomb site changes, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
But if you're playing an active playstyle, if your teammate dies on the other side of the map, thinking defense or even offense, you can take map control, you can push forward and try to even up numbers, right? Or you could even say the flip side. If you're the one to take the first duel rather than your teammate, then you kind of completely cut out the possibility of him dying. Of course, in like higher ranks, you have to kind of play a little bit more smart because you can't just push every round and take a peek. But, in those examples, I kind of want to illustrate like an active play style might be just, I guess, like pre-planning with your teammates what their setup is, like asking
Hmm.
what they're gonna do so you can
Hmm.
leverage their setup instead of kind of just, doing your own thing the entire game. So that kind of gets into a little bit of nuance in the higher ranks, but like having an active play style isn't just running it down. It's like, taking in all the considerations and then trying to put yourself in the action. I
Hmm.
would say is the best way of explaining it.
On defense, you would say an active playstyle would generally be because you kind of run into this sometimes where like let's say you're playing not a sentinel, any other role, and you're setting up on a site, and then that sentinel is really setting up for like a hold
Hmm.
and to anchor, then it really actually doesn't really support that sentinel for you to be super active and take map control on that side. You're better off like going to the other side of the map, coordinating with your duelist and trying to take map control. Is that kind of like generally the playbook of what an active playstyle looks like?
I would agree. Yeah, because if you think about it even more, like if you take map control on the other side away from your sentinel, then you can push them into your sentinel util, which is objectively another good thing. So, yeah, that's a good way of explaining it.
What does that look like on attack then?
On attack, an active playstyle, I guess, looks to be like you're looking for their weakest side. So
Mhm,
this can kind of look like in a lot of variations, but for the most players, like active playstyle just looks like for the opening pick. Where can I
mhm,
get the easiest kill and just get the first blood and open up the map?
mhm.
In higher level games, like maybe an active playstyle is thinking about where the trips are and then go and breaking the trip so your teammates don't have to think about it. Or just like getting a lot of info everywhere or like putting pressure on a certain piece of the map so you kind of figure out their setup before your teammates walk into, let's say, an op before they die. So
Okay.
this of course works a lot with initiator. You can be like, oh yeah, let me get util here and then come back and drone to figure out where their op is.
So it's not just running it down.
Definitely not just running it down.
Okay. When I wanna make a distinction, is an active playstyle always the correct move?
I would say, like, if I were to throw an arbitrary number, like it's not always, but it's probably like 90% or higher.
So like an
Bec-
example would be like a lot of people are like, when you're on attack, you are fundamentally active, right?
Mhm.
And then you take a bomb site, you plant the bomb. Now the map is flipped effectively. You're the defenders are the attackers. there's a lot of people that would be like, okay, play bomb tap, play time, fall back, don't peek, right? I think I think I've heard Hooge talk about that, Hoojin, where he says like, the time as a brim is now to be active and time is now to be super passive. So do you think that mindset of getting really passive once you have a bomb plant, that's like losing you round wins or losing you conversions? Like, would you rather people just be trying to push for space?
That definitely depends on numbers because you can climb very high, probably to Immortal 3. There's players that have done it before. I'm not going to name call, but they literally get on site, plant, and then just knife out, run back, stare at flank for a little bit, and then stare into the sky with their molly lineups.
Yeah, for lineups.
Yep, and then they climb consistently doing that. But there are some really obvious rounds that they would lose because they aren't using that molly lineup or that molly to delay on site instead, and like you said, to fight for map control.
Mhm.
So the win condition there definitely deviates, but I would say like more oftentimes than not, if you just sit on site, look for duels or take map control or even delay their execute or their retake, you would win more rounds than if you did playing lineups. So even in those scenarios, I will say active playstyle makes more sense. And that's why I said the 90%, because there are some rounds where it just objectively makes sense to just fall back and then use your molly to buy time.
Okay. How do you develop an active playstyle?
There's a lot of ways to kind of start, but I think the first one is kind of just minimizing downtime. Anytime you feel like, oh, I'm not doing anything right now, then try to do something either by pushing or by rotating or something like that. And then, of course, you're going to get punished by lurkers or just running into them and losing, So you might have like a negative feedback loop of these
Mhm.
things, but
Mhm.
it's, I guess, important to understand like on the rounds that you do have impact because you rotated early, you're minimizing the rounds that you play retake simulator or yeah, I guess just retake simulator on defense. And then for offense, like in those 1v5 clutch rounds that you can't win.
Like what comes to mind for me is like yesterday as an example, I was playing bind and I was, slowly working out on defense on
Hmm.
showers. And there was like a couple times where I got caught. And then the mindset is like, oh, therefore I just shouldn't be doing this at all. Like if I've died around doing this, it was the wrong play. But what I'm hearing for you is like sometimes you can make the right play and you can still die.
Yeah, and this Hooch says it all the time, but like if you're playing Jet and you're opping and you're missing, you should still buy the op because it's the right play. Like you
Mhm.
just don't stop buying the op because you're missing. Like you
Mhm.
just,
Mhm.
the good player knows that you still have to buy it.
Mhm.
So that's the same thing here. Is like objectively making these active plays might not net you, the round 100% of the time, but it will net you maybe like a slight edge or hopefully
Mhm.
a bigger than slight edge.
Mhm. Well, I think we haven't talked about this before, but it's just that similar like poker or other games, like we're probabilistically just trying to gain small edges all the time. Like
Hmm.
we're gonna trying to gain small edges by pre-rounding and like knowing there's like a KJ ultimate, so you can play around it, or a Brim ultimate and you can play around it. Um, that you'd be giving up if you weren't doing it,
Right.
but it's still not going to work out every time.
Hmm.
What's been hard with students, like teaching them or getting them to kind of adopt an active play style?
So this is mainly with players that kind of have inherently played the more passive roles, like controllers and sentinels. I
Hmm.
noticed that a few things. If they are trying to push their active playstyle, their mechanics probably are at a lower level that it doesn't match the level of aggression they're trying to pull off.
Sure.
So they'll kind of like try to play more active and then just die, and then that will like double down on them playing passive for the rest of the game.
Hmm.
So that's kind of like that negative feedback loop, which off topic, but that's kind of why I think support players as in controllers and sentinels have inflated ranks
Hmm.
because they can just throw basic util and kind of do their minimum job and then climb.
Hmm. Well, they're
But
passengers.
they're passengers, yeah. So that's really difficult because then we have to kind of like level up your mechanics, but also develop a whole new play style. It's like rewriting the player identity as a whole,
Hmm.
and that is super difficult. So like as a experiment, I have people play initiator because it doesn't make sense for them to go duelist if they're playing controller senti. I have them play like a really simple initiator, like fade, on their worst map, like statistically. So like let's
Mhm.
say like I struggle really really hard on, I don't know, split.
Mhm.
Okay, you will no longer play Omen or Brimstone or Astra. You will play Fade, and then you will use util, and you will be with the team, and you will just use util all the time. And you're looking for duels. And then because you have util, your duels aren't 50-50s anymore. And it kind of like forces you to think about how to get map
Mhm.
info or like take map control and things like that. So by like introducing that, getting them in more active spots, like using util and taking fights, I found that it kind of helps translate to controller players. Like when they
Mhm.
actually do play their controller role, they're more willing to like take a fight or like push for space, things like that, because they've done it before, even though it's on a different agent.
We also talked about this before, like this idea of like if you're improving or your true skill level and your actual rank. And so
Mm,
if you have an active play style, you're going to actually achieve the rank that matches your skill level a lot faster than if you have a passive play style. Like the passive play style, I mean, I don't have a number, but I would guess maybe it could take you, 50% more games
mm-hmm,
because you're having less of effect on the game, right? And the other one we were talking about was this idea that if you have an active play style, you're making more plays. You're going to know how those go, which can inform how you play in the future. You're making more decisions. Whereas in
mm-hmm,
passive play style, you're making less decisions. And
mm-hmm.
so you're going to learn slower. Whereas in active play style, you have the opportunity to learn faster.
And I just want to add to that, like even in my games when I feel like I have to fill, because like at least the comp thing kind of matters when I'm playing with pros on my team. I find myself regularly playing Omen or Killjoy,
Mhm.
and in those type of games, like I'm taking way less risk. I'm not playing how I normally play, and like those historically are my worst performing games. And
Mhm.
it's not because like my mechanics are off. It's just like I have no identity as a player because I'm just filling, and
Mhm.
like it's like so it's very easy, I think, to kind of fall into the pit of like not being active and trying to be passive because you don't want to like mess things up.
I think
So,
one thing from playing controller where you can adopt an active mindset or active play style a little bit is like, especially on defense, if you know one side is stacked and your side is the weak side, then you want to actually like preemptively smoke the weak side
mhm,
to like like to try to manipulate the team to go the other way.
right.
Like I've seen and like it doesn't work every time because people just push your smokes and they'll run through. But it works some of the time. Like when you
Mhm,
smoke super aggressively, they're like somebody's sitting there with a shotgun. Let's just leave.
right.
So that's where I've seen it work in the controller role sometimes. Maybe how
That
does it? Oh yeah, you go ahead.
I was gonna say Daznarth is a good example of that because he will play Sentinel, but he'll put his camera on one site and then play the other site, and then he'll shoot the camera early and be like, "Oh, Cypher's playing C site. Let's go A," because you don't want to run into the Dazzler shotgun. And then boom, Dazzler shotgun gets 3 kills. So yeah, a little bit of misdirection.
It is kind of astonishing that he's radiant.
The dude's insane. Honestly, his rifle is actually a lot better than I thought. I've played with him a couple of times, and it's pretty
But
incredible.
people like legitimately like really hate him.
Oh yeah, I mean his playstyle is very cringe.
How does an active play style tie into the growth mindset? And maybe
Um,
before we even do that, have we defined the growth mindset?
I don't
I don't
think
know we have.
so.
Okay, why don't you go and define the growth mindset and I'll just fill in the blanks.
Okay, so for me, growth mindset is kind of like not looking at like the game as a whole, like your results. Like you win or lose, that doesn't matter. Like growth mindset is like what could you have done differently, or like trying to take pieces of like what you could have improved on, I guess. So as long as
Mhm.
you're trying to improve, then that's the thing that matters.
Mhm. Yeah, for me
And
growth mindset is like instead of thinking like I'm bad or I'm good, it's just I'm not good at this yet.
hmm,
And so what that unlocks then is the ability to like put time and effort into practice and focusing on improving things rather than just feeling like I'm bad at this game, there's nothing I can do about it. And so it's a real move from a focus on protecting ego to focusing on effort.
hmm
and that eventually you believe that if you put enough effort, you will improve.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of thinking that this is just who I am. Oh, I was born without like a tens like talent in terms of aiming, therefore like I can't get better.
Yeah, and I just want to add on top of that. I feel like it's one of the most insulting things to say X, Y, or Z player got there because of talent. Where like at least like in my opinion, like there's way more hard work that gets put behind it than just something like talent. Like if you look
Mhm.
at Demon One, for example, of course he's really good. But like no one really thinks about like, oh, this guy's been grinding forever and now he's getting an opportunity, he's good. Some people might just think, oh yeah, it's just genetics. It's not
Mhm.
genetics. I feel like that's just insulting. But
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, well, there was that quote we talked about. I think it was a while ago, where like talent, a lot of people underperform their talent. Education, a lot of people do nothing with their education. It's like the hard work that really defines people. And what's important about that too is also like hard work is one thing, finding the thing that actually like is your passion is the other thing. Because if you have a capacity for hard work and you're really excited about the thing, then you're going to be kind of unstoppable.
Hmm.
And the last part was like kind of like why does like so growth mindset, and then there's locus of control. So there's like an internal locus control, like it's within me, and an external locus of control. Like what does that mean for you?
I guess like taking responsibility for whatever I can do and like in the game, like, how you react to your teammates, talk to your teammates, or like, pre-rounding, things like that. Like, I guess that's like what locus of control to me, but I think maybe you can define it a little bit further.
Yeah, I think like a big part of it is like, do you believe you have like impact on your life? Because like we all
Mm,
have friends and people that we know that are like, this teacher was bad, he didn't teach it well, and that's why I didn't do well on the test, and like it was late, and or it was rainy outside, and that's why I was late. It's always like external factors that are controlling their results.
mm,
And so there's like it's like external locus control is really kind of aligned with like a victim mindset. Like the world happens to me, like I don't happen in the world, you know? Where
teammates,
bad
things like
teammates, losers queue, riots like out to get me, you know?
mm-hmm,
When the reality is the only common denominator in all your games is you.
mm-hmm,
So if you have a quote unquote not good rank, like it's not anyone's fault but yours. Like it's a reflective of who you are, right? And but we just contrasted this against an internal locus of control, which is I have the like we don't have the ability to win every game, but we do believe we have the ability to impact games. We have the ability to impact our lives. And so we believe that it's worthwhile to try. Whereas like effort kind of aligns with an internal locus control, victimhood kind of aligns with an external locus control. And like I think it'd be fairly clear to see which one would align with being able to like improve at something like Valorant.
mm. And to kind of tie this all together, like, I guess it's very easy to say, "Oh, I'm playing retake simulator," or like they're not going to my site, or we keep running into the op, or like X, Y, and Z. Whereas like in reality, like if you were playing actively and you were taking responsibility, you would be reading the game and reading the enemy's tendencies and seeing what site they go the most, or like maybe they're going to the other site because it is weak site, like weak side, and like you need to beef it up. So yeah.
Well, because you notice this when people have like just loads and loads of excuses, right? Like
Hmm.
there's that meme about like Valorant and like precise gunplay. And yes, sometimes you get full running Deagle headshotted. It just
Hmm.
happens. But you just forget the times that you did that to other people. Like
Hmm.
when you hit a fadeaway shot through a wall into a head that like you weren't aiming for, right? But people, I think it's called fundamental attribution error, which is when other people do bad things, it's because they're bad people or they have poor character. But when you do bad things, it's circumstance. So like
Mm.
the most common one is like if you're driving and someone cuts you off, you're like that person is evil, basically. Like they're a terrible person. They have no regard for anyone else. But
Hmm.
when you cut someone off by accident, you're like, oh, I was rushing. Like I'm usually a pretty good driver. Like it's circumstances, not character. And so I think it's very like this happens a lot in Valorant and any online game where anyone else's mistake is like fundamentally a mistake of character. Like they don't have brain cells. or they don't have hands, right? But when we make a mistake, it's like whatever, like it happens. I'm usually pretty good.
I'm definitely guilty of that. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm 2-17 this game. I'm like, oh, I'm just playing bad. I'm not getting the support I need. And then I get a 2-17 play. I'm like, dude, this guy can't shoot straight. So definitely have that. Of course, I don't voice it to my teammates, but
Sure, sure.
you know,
Unless you get hot mic'd.
yeah, which I think they fixed, hopefully.
Yeah, they fixed it. And what has been helpful in getting players to adopt a more active play style? Like, I think I've heard part of it, which is you kind of switch them into like a fundamentally more active role. But what else have you seen support players in taking more control of their games?
To be honest, this is probably one of the harder things. So I don't know if I have like a lot of success stories, I guess, aside from like maybe a few. But aside from like changing their role, I guess like I tried to, if they have good mechanics, I try to like push them towards taking more control because they can take more fights. Like,
Mhm,
oh, your mechanics are good. Put yourself into situations where you can showcase that. And that
mhm,
tends to work well because they're like, oh, yeah, more kills. Yeah, yeah, I'm good at
mhm,
this. They
mhm,
want more of that. But for players that I find that like are more passive and have like lower level mechanics than maybe that their rank should be, that's definitely the hardest part because like their rank is already inflated in my opinion, and then they try to play more actively, and they're just gonna
plummet.
nosedive because like you were saying before, your true rank is gonna get shown when you're trying to make these plays, and if
Mhm.
your mechanics and decision making isn't up to par, then of course you're gonna get worse.
Wouldn't
Or
they focus then just be on aim training, working on mechanics?
that's probably a good way of approaching it, but like unfortunately mechanics isn't something that you get overnight.
Mm,
Whereas
it's a
like
longer
the
term thing.
right, but like with the active playstyle, you can already start implementing taking more fights or,
Mhm,
you know, being a little bit more aggressive. So there's definitely like I guess like a difficult relationship with like that. And for those players, like I honestly that's my toughest point. Like I always try to like encourage them like this is the right thing. It's gonna get worse before it gets better. Make sure like you're still trying to communicate. And I guess for those things like those players, I push communicating a little bit more
mhm.
because you have to make up for your lack of mechanics and lack of comfort by just communicating more. And that doesn't mean like having perfect plans. It's just like, I'm going to do this. Can you do this to help me? Or like, can you help me do this type of thing?
Mhm. How quickly do you think, is it like a 1 month thing? Is it a 2 or 3 month thing to like fundamentally like improve your mechanics?
Improve your mechanics. I mean, if you train it every single day, you probably see a significant like difference probably within a month and a half to 2 months. Of course, you can make significant improvements if your setup or your sensitivity was just on the extreme outlier.
Mhm,
For example, if someone's playing 800 DPI point 0.7 and you're not Forsaken and you're in plat and you go from 800 DPI to like, or 800 DPI point 0.7 to like point 0.5, which is still high, you're going to be a lot more consistent. And then eventually you go down to like point 0.4, maybe even 0.35, and
mhm,
then you're just going to have way more significant or consistent aim.
mhm,
But if like that's not the case, like you're already on decent gear, decent settings, that's like somewhat optimal, it's going to take a lot longer.
mm,
Like
mm,
for some people that haven't touched an aim trainer in their life, then maybe 2 weeks could be
mhm,
substantial, you
mhm,
know?
mhm.
But other than that, like I would say probably like a month to 2 months.
Well, that segues into like we were going to cover process over results as well.
Hmm.
And I think for me, process over results is really not like knowing that sometimes results can be misleading. Like it's really,
Mm.
really common in like a game like Magic the Gathering, but even in Valorant, you can make the wrong decision and get rewarded, and you can make the right decision and be punished. But if you take that feedback as that was the wrong play, even when it was the right play, you're gonna actually like actively become worse as a player because you're getting like bad feedback. But so process over results, it's a big deal. It also results, if you are overly focused in results, I think it also has like a number of like outcomes that are bad for your improvement. One of them is like short-term thinking. So like we've talked about this before. Like, what has been your experience with like short-term thinking as it relates to like switching sends, switching crosshairs, switching peripheral? Tell us about your journey on that, and maybe tell us what your epiphany was.
I'm definitely guilty of the sensitivity changing, peripheral change. Even just like I have this mouse that just came in, and I have
What's that mouse?
this is the Givo's Hadi X, which is similar to the Demon One mouse, but smaller hump. And then I have 3 other mice, like literally on top of my PC case right next to me. And then I change my sensitivity every day. I used to change my sensitivity in between games after each round, just looking for some type of cope result. So
Okay.
this one's
What about
definitely
mouse pad?
mouse pad. Actually, I've changed over the course of the years, but now I have a really good one that I'm super happy with. So
Which
at
is
least
what?
the Artisan Zero Soft.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Okay.
so that one I've stuck with. But even coping further, chair height, ergonomics, things like that, definitely changed a lot in the past year. And yeah, this one's
What
definitely
is the thing under that thing that prompts the compulsive switching?
like not performing to like the level that I think I've performed at before, or the
Yeah.
level that I think I could get at. Like this thing will make me better, or this
This
thing
one
is like
thing is going to unlock.
exactly. So that's definitely something I struggle with, and something
And
that
so every time, well, then every time you've been changing it, you've been getting closer, right?
mhm. No,
No.
no, no. The answer is no, but it's nice to cope with, I guess.
Well, then what is the epiphany here for you around this?
I mean, it's definitely like hard work is anything. Like if you look at all these pros, 99% of them probably sit in a suboptimal position that's bad for X, Y, and Z.
Oh,
Right?
have you ever seen Redgar play? Like that
Literally
man's
like this,
neck
bro.
looks like he's being in like in a torture device.
Yes. Yeah. And then like with the sensitivity thing, like objectively, Forsaken sense is so high that it doesn't make sense to play. But Forsaken and something are probably 2 of the most mechanically insane players in Valorant, and they play
When I
on these.
watch Forsaken's like screen, like he doesn't aim, he snaps. Like he doesn't, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it's really crazy to watch.
Mhm.
Looks impossible to play on.
Mhm. But he does it, and
Mhm.
that's,
That
process
worked for
over
him.
results. Yeah. So, I mean, the big takeaway is just like not to overthink it and just play the game. And then once you have
Mhm.
enough time into it, you'll just be good, right? But like everyone's always looking for shortcuts, including myself, which I don't know, it's a tough, like always trying to like min max and perfect. Like at some point, it's like, I guess it's the 80-20 rule. Like,
Mhm.
20% of the things you do will give you 80% of the results. And then do you really want to do the 80% of the things just to get 20% of the result?
I heard one person tell me once, when you're feeling really down or you're feeling really up about what's going on in your life, you can even use this in your games, right? But easier with life when you think of these timelines is like you feel really down, rather than thinking like how the last day is gone, think about your last 6 months.
Hmm.
How's your last 6 months been? That tells you actually a lot more than how the last day's gone. And I feel like there's this like, it's a real supportive view for people to just generally default to like longer term views. And that's where coaching can help, but also just like your own growth and wisdom. Like I know for me, when I was on my like fitness journey of trying to hit my lift goals, there was a point where I was like switching programs like every 2 months, which, because you're always thinking it's the program that's going to unlock the progress, when what happens is like all you actually end up doing is shortchanging your results because you're adopting to a new program every 2 months, which is kind of ridiculous. Like you can actually know whether something's optimal, but it takes a lot longer to know whether it's working for you than like once or twice. And
Hmm.
I feel like similarly, like adopting our view on sensitivity and mice should be like a longer term thing. Like I feel like maybe it should be like a week to decide whether this setting works for you rather than like one game or like one day.
Hmm.
What what does it mean for you with when results can lead you astray? Like do you see students sometimes make mistakes but think it's the right play?
100%. Yeah. They're like, I guess like the obvious result would be like, oh yeah, I pushed this smoke objectively bad, gets 3 kills, right? Oh, that was a good smoke push because of this timing was good, this, and this, right? Objectively bad play. But I will say, like, I do push this more than the passive approach where like you just don't do anything. So
Mhm,
like
mhm,
I guess like I encourage people to overheat rather than to underheat, if that's
mhm,
a thing.
mhm.
So it definitely happens, but at least on the upside of things, I think it's better in that case.
But also, like, I think of it sometimes like a lot of good habits only benefit you occasionally, right? Like if you don't walk peak things or you don't shift peak things, sometimes you get away with it.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of like lower elo players, myself included, get away with it and then therefore kind of think it's okay. Do
I
you know what I
see.
mean?
Yeah, so like the way you peak angles, that's definitely something that, at least on my VOD review streams, like when I'm reviewing players, that's something I definitely point out. And I guess that's a good example of like something that you should be hard on. So it's good to be hard on like fundamental stuff.
Mhm,
Like, if you shift peak this angle, like, and you don't die or you get the kill, of course I'm gonna point it out.
yeah.
Right. But like, if like you, I guess, decision making wise, like push this when like objectively you have number advantage or whatever, like that's less important to me.
Mhm, mhm. Well, on the peaking, like I like if I've ever watched someone like Ye play a deathmatch, like that man is like utterly methodical when it comes to like peaking angles. Like he's a robot, right?
Right.
But it also means that like 50% or like maybe let's 70% of the time there's no one there. But the 30% of the time someone's there, he just clicks.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's almost
Really.
no aiming.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where low elo players like myself don't see the necessity is because like we haven't ingrained that habit. Like I think sometimes the result of like not getting punished is giving us like the wrong signal.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you look for the signal for your students? Like you can't just go on the last 2 games how they played. Like do you look at like the last 20 games, like the rolling win rate, or do you look at round win percentage, or do you look at their ADR? Like what are you looking for of like other than just purely their rank, which over the long term tells you something? Like in the short term, like how are you looking at improvement for that player? Or is it more just on the VOD review that you're seeing mechanical and fundamental things improve?
I think you brought up some good metrics that could be used, like the round win percentage, or like the 20 game. But like kind of like what I look at depends on the role.
Mhm,
So like if you're a duelist and you lose the game, did you have a lot of first bloods? Or did you have like a lot of engagements overall? Like if you're
mhm,
20 and 20 and you lost the game 11-13, then you probably had a good game,
mhm,
Or like even if you're, I don't know, 15 or 10 kills, but you have like 20-25 deaths. Like at least you're trying to get the duels. Whereas like if you lost a game with like very little duels and very little like kills and deaths as a duelist, like you're probably not playing well. So like I
mhm.
kind of look at that. ADR is a not a great one to look at, just because if you have a good or a bad game, it's gonna like it's correlated to the
Yeah,
game result typically.
yeah.
So yeah, I guess like other than the duelist thing, like assists are a good one if you're playing initiator. But like just other than that, I guess like if you're applying the note, then it's good. So like I guess it's more so the bot view, like you said. Cast is another good one. Kill,
Mhm,
assess, survival rate, and trade percentage. If you have a high cast, I think that's a good sign of you being active, because
mhm,
if you get the kill, you get 100%. If you get traded, you get 100%. If you get assist, you get 100%. And then the rounds you just completely do nothing and die right away, then of course there's something wrong with that.
mhm,
So
mhm, mhm.
yeah, that's probably a good stat to look at. But other than that, I think it is very specific.
So what would be the main takeaway for you from our podcast today? Like what do you think we want to leave the audience with?
Like, don't focus too much on winning and losing. If you rank up or derank, like that's not the important thing. The important thing is to figure out like how you can get more control and impact over the game.
Mhm,
And that is something that you can kind of like subjectively measure, or even like objectively measure. You can be like, how many rounds did I actually play retake simulator this game?
mhm, mhm,
And if you can kind of reduce that number to like, let's say, if you were playing retake sim half of the rounds and you reduced it to even 4 or 5, then that's still pretty good. But if you can
mhm,
like make it like 2 or 1, like that's really good, even if you still lose the game. So, just making small, like you said, slight edges
Mhm.
to your gameplay, I think that's the big one.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like if the only common denominator in all your games is you, then like the biggest thing you can do to improve this game is to like level up your mindset of thinking
Hmm.
like I can get better at this, and the only way I can get better at this is by improving, and it's going to be like a longer thing instead of like hoping that we're just like the main character in an anime and then there's like one weird trick that's going to unlock everything, right? And I think like knowing that, like if you can almost like that David Goggins mindset of like if you know that you will be relentless in improving, I just don't see how you can improve.
Right.
But if you're
Impossible.
waiting for the improving to happen to you, it's like probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I was watching a Alex Hormozy video today, and it's very similar to the Goggins mindset, but he was saying like you want to live without luck. Like luck will never happen. If you do X, Y, and Z and you still don't get the result, you better go back and do it again, or do more, whatever. And I forget the exact quote, but it's along the lines of like volume trumps luck or something like that. Like if you have a lot
Yeah,
of
if
volume, you'll get to where you need to be.
yeah, volume and effort. Because every time, like I think like MCU said this was like you win and you learn, right? So you're gonna win, or if you didn't get it, you're gonna learn, and then the next time you try it, you're trying from a place of being informed, and
Hmm.
you're gonna have a better result or better opportunity to do well from there.
Hmm.
Cool.
Cool.
Well, thanks, Adam. Thanks everyone for listening, and until next week.
Till next week. Thank you.